Well, for more on this, we can speak to Kevin Ozebek, who's in Brussels for us. Kevin, good to speak to you this afternoon. So, Frederica there laying out some of the plans to increase EU investment in Africa. What else does she have to say?
Well, she's really calling this a shift in mentality, a shift in strategy when it comes to the EU's foreign policy on how to deal with the ongoing and, in many cases, the worsening migration crisis. So what she and what the European Commission wants to do is to create individual relationships and partnerships with countries in the Middle East and Africa that either are hosting a huge amount of refugees or either many refugees are leaving those countries to head to Europe. Some of the countries named here include Jordan, Lebanon, Niger, Senegal, and Mali. And basically what the EU wants to do is set up some positive and negative consequences for these countries, depending on if these third-party countries are willing to work with the EU to stop the flow of migrants or at least stem the flow of migrants. Now, some of these benefits that these countries would get if they are willing to work with the EU here is better trade deals and more development aid. Now, according to this proposal from Mogherini and the EU, or the European Commission, I should say, if some of these countries are not willing to work with the EU wants to give them less development aid, take some of that aid away, and possibly even what they're proposing is to enact new trade deals that aren't so much in these in the benefit of these third-party countries.
Absolutely. And Kevin, you mentioned it there, the sort of stick, the incentive that is on display here by Mogherini, withdrawing of aid. And they also talked about using private sector to go into parts of Africa to help to try and raise standards in those countries to kind of deter, or just to have people living in those countries happy to stay and not come to Europe.
And what the EU is also saying when it comes to that specific issue is that how aid is delivered right now just simply is not working. It's not sustainable. The EU wants to try to get to the source of the migration crisis, specifically when it comes to the huge number of people who are fleeing Africa to Europe. In the EU's eyes, these are mostly economic migrants. They don't fit the refugee status like people do who are fleeing Iraq and Syria. So they want to help boost the economies of these African countries to give people an incentive to stay and to make these countries more livable and to give these people more economic opportunities back at home. So leaving and trying to get to Europe isn't even first and forefront on these people's minds.
Absolutely. And Kevin, we'd be remiss not to talk about it. Of course, in the background of all of this is the deal between the EU and Turkey. There have been some harsh words exchanged by both sides in the past few months. Just whereabouts are we on this deal, on this visa-free travel? It was meant to be coming in by June, wasn't it?
Well, on Friday here in Brussels, there will be another meeting where members of the EU will be looking at the status of all of this. The status and how effective this deal is really depends on who you talk to. There's no question about it that the number of people leaving Turkey for Greece has slowed down to just a trickle right now. But still here in Brussels, there is so much hesitancy when it comes to this deal. Some of the comments being made by President Erdogan, most recently the comments he made about women, and that it should be their obligation to bear children, is very worrying to people here in Brussels. There's many people here in Brussels who don't think Ankara will ever make all the changes needed and fit all the requirements for visa-free travel. So there is the fear here that this EU-Turkey partnership, this EU-Turkey deal could crumble at any second.
Okay, well, Kevin, for now in Brussels, good to speak to you. Thank you.